Yeah, I think Ramya has pretty much said everything. So I think the sun is basically in its middle age now. So maybe if the human lifespan is of the order of 80 years, the sun is probably 45 to 50 years old right now, which is what she said. So the sun will continue to shine this way for another 4 billion years before the catastrophic strikes. It becomes a red giant, and then the solar mass is not sufficient enough to form a neutron star or a black hole. So the end stage of the sun's life would be spent as a white dwarf, basically. So the sun is not going to end up as a supernova, but something much less spectacular than that. And after that nova is formed, the outer layers of the sun are shed, the sun will end up as a small white dwarf whose size is actually going to be much, much smaller than that of the Earth. So the Earth's size is around 12,000 kilometers. So the size of a white dwarf comparatively would be around 200 kilometers. So that is how the sun is going to end its life. But before it does, as Ramya pointed out, the sun is going to bulge up so much that it is going to, the size of the sun is going to be similar to the orbit of the Mars. And afterwards it will shed its outer layers and end up as a very small white dwarf. So that is what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
Thank you, Niraj.
Thanks, Piyali. Yeah. There's a question. Does eclipse have any effect on satellite communication? It's a good question. Not really, because the shadow of the moon is falling on the Earth, right? If the shadow of the moon was falling on the satellite, then of course its solar panels would not be able to generate energy for that time. So that would be the only effect. But there's another very interesting effect on the Earth because of solar eclipses in our modern times when we focusing on green energy, right? So many countries, a large fraction of their energy comes from solar panels. And if a solar eclipse happens, in the middle of the day, for example, like it happened a couple of years ago, there'll be a sudden decrease of energy flowing into the national grid from the solar panels, and therefore they have to take special care to make sure that that doesn't have any adverse effect, doesn't trip the entire grid or something, right? So they have to slowly reduce the power from the solar grid into the national grid and then raise it again after the eclipse. So it's kind of an interesting effect solar eclipses have on our modern life in the context of green energies. There's a question about why can't Mercury or Venus have an eclipse on Earth? So we answered that earlier, but let's handle that again. Aratrika, would you like to handle that?
Yeah, of course. So the thing is that both Venus and Mercury, those are pretty small planets, and both are quite far away from us as compared to the Moon and Earth's relative size and distance. So what the thing is, they do form shadows on Earth, but they are almost negligible. They cannot really be observed by us. So those are mostly called transits, not eclipses in that sense. Yeah, I hope that's enough.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Aratrika. Yeah. So we do have Mercury and Venus transits. There won't be any of them soon. We had a couple of Venus transits last decade and also a couple of Mercury transits. Nowadays we observe transits because they look beautiful. The eclipse looks beautiful, so does the transit, of course. But the transits have a historical importance. It was by measuring the time of the Venus transit from different parts of the Earth that we first knew how to calculate the actual distance between objects in the solar system. So till then, we only knew the relative distances. We knew that, for example, if the distance between Earth and the Sun was 1, then Earth and Venus is so and so, Jupiter and Sun is so and so, and so on. Everything was relative to a given distance. But to calculate the absolute distance between objects in the solar system, Venus transit was what was used in the 1800s to calculate them accurately. Now, of course, there are much more accurate ways of doing so. What is the effect of radiation skimming across the moon falling on the Earth? Not really. The radiation skimming across the moon falling on Earth is almost negligible. It would be because of gravitational lensing, and that's extremely small because the moon's mass is very, very small. Anyway, it would still be far less than without an eclipse, right? So there is no effect, there's no harmful effect of the eclipse on us. There's no extra radiation coming from the solar eclipse which will affect us. You can eat, you can drink, you can go out, you can do whatever you want to, and so on. It's an interesting question about the impact of the eclipse on the waves in the ocean. That's an interesting question. Of course, we know that waves on, I suppose you mean tides, so I'm going to assume you mean tides, right? Uh, Tides in our ocean are caused by the moon's gravity as well as sun's gravity, and we know that the moon plays a much more significant role in affecting the tides in our oceans compared to the sun. And of course, but then of course, when the sun and the moon are roughly the same direction, the tides add up and you get stronger tides. And that is true for every new moon, for example, right? During full moon, you get less tides because they're in opposite directions. So the tides between during a new moon and during an actual solar eclipse aren't that different because the moon is almost the same direction as the sun within 2 degrees or so. So there will not be much noticeable effect on tides because of the eclipse over and above what happens during a new moon anyway. Yeah, so as you can see, the eclipse is still ongoing in Bangalore, and that is because we're far south, and the shadow of the moon is moving southwards from Russia down to South India, and therefore, as time went by, we started with the eclipse in Russia, then Kazakhstan, Central Asia, Ladakh, Central India, and now and sun is set in Ladakh now, and now we are seeing the eclipse from Bangalore. In fact, we're seeing it from the terrace. There are Prasanna and other colleagues of his are upstairs sending us the live stream of the eclipse, which is being relayed from by Swastik, who's here. I request Swastik to come here and say hello because he's been doing a lot of work, and I think people should see him and say hello. That's Swastik is a student here. He's doing his PhD in IIA, and that's it. And so he and Amit have been behind the computer since 4 o'clock, and it's because of them we've been getting the live stream from across the world. So thanks.
Yeah, hi everyone, and here I'm meeting. I'm still alive.
Yes. So as you can see, the sun sets in Bangalore at 5:55, but it will set probably a few minutes before that here because we have some trees and buildings in the horizon. It's 5:40 now, so we will continue this till sunset in Bangalore, and then we'll stop this transmission. We still have quite a few of people with us now. Thanks for staying so long. I will and Randeep Singh says hello, Swastik. I don't know if you know him.
Okay. Yeah, hi from my end.
Yeah. So somebody's asked whether shadow of the moon falling on the surface of the sun is called a solar eclipse. No. The light falling on the moon is because of the sun, and therefore the shadow of the moon will always be behind the moon as seen from the sun, and therefore it cannot fall on the sun. It's like saying shadow of me because the sun can fall on the sun, it can only fall below me, right? So that's how it is. Yeah. So there are some questions about how come ancient Indians were able to predict eclipses without telescopes and so on. That's a very good question. So astronomers from across the world in many cultures were able to predict eclipse very accurately much before telescopes were invented. And these were because they had good models for the motion of celestial objects around in the sky. So Indian astronomers, starting from Aryabhatta up to the Kerala School of Mathematics, and even later, if you look at Patani Samanta Chandrasekhara in Orissa, have had perfected or had continuously updated the methods of calculating the paths of the moon and the sun in the sky, and therefore the eclipses for many centuries. Similarly, it was also done, for example, in Europe, in China, in Mesopotamia, long back, in Egypt, and so on and so forth, in Greeks and all that. So the model they used was that they would model the objects going around the Earth in a circle, but that was not quite accurate because the Earth is the one which is going around the Sun. Therefore, they had to modify these circles with what we call epicycles, and then they would look at the predictions of where the planets or the Sun or Moon should be, let's say next month, with what actually happened, and they would then notice there are some errors. They would then modify the epicyclic models and so on. So they kept modifying these models across many centuries, across various cultures, including India, so that it agreed better and better with the observations. But of course, once we realized globally that it was the sun that is the center of the solar system and not the earth, then we threw away the epicyclic model and came to the heliocentric model, where of course the calculations became much, much easier. And now, because we can use dynamical equations from Newton's time, we can add in the effect of very small perturbations. For example, the effect of Jupiter on Earth's orbit, or effect of Saturn on Earth's orbit, and so on. And therefore, we can refine our predictions even more and predict eclipses much more accurately than we could before. But there's one very interesting application of ancient Indian eclipse observations, which is pioneered in Bangalore actually by Dr. B.S. Shailaja, who used to be the director of the Jawaharlal Nehru Planetarium in Bangalore, and her student Geeta Kaidala. They looked at stone inscriptions across Karnataka and Andhra dating 2000 years ago, so last 1000 years, in old Kannada. And some of them would be recording, gifts by the kings and so on during an eclipse, right? And they would then mention, okay, this village, the eclipse was seen at this time, and this is when the king gave so much money to the temple, and so on. And this kind of thing is found in other parts of the world as well. So what people do, including Dr. Shailaja and a student at Bangalore, is that we know when the eclipse should have occurred and where it should have occurred, let's say 800 years ago. You compare that with the records, and then you can check if there's any error. And any error can then be possibly attributed to perturbations in the moon's orbit itself. These are called delta T studies, and it's very important, right? So if you have eclipse records in stones or parchment or whatever dating back 1000 years, 1500 years, you can use that to have constraints on how much the moon's orbit has changed by very little bit. And this is something which is being done in India as well, increasingly, along with other records in other parts of the world. Are there going to be an impact of climate change on the eclipse? No, not really. If, except that, our atmosphere might get very, very hazy and murky and we will not be see anything, but there's no effect of climate change. I'm just holding the fort till people come back from upstairs after they see the eclipse. So I just keep answering questions till sunset. Are there any electric and magnetic field effects of the eclipse on Earth? No, there's not really. Not on the Earth's surface. Impact of eclipse on astrophysics in India? Oh, there's plenty. So eclipses are, as you're seeing, beautiful events, right? They're absolutely marvelous events, and there's something which excites everybody, right? So a lot of people I know got interested in science or astronomy because they saw an eclipse safely at some point, right? But astrophysics development in India itself was influenced very, very deeply by eclipses. The total solar eclipse on 18th August 1868 passed through Andhra Pradesh. Okay, and in Machilipatnam, and then this just when spectroscopy had been invented, right? So Pierre Janssen had set up a camp in Guntur in Andhra, and Norman Pogson, who was the director of the Madras Observatory, had set up a camp in Machilipatnam in Andhra to see the eclipse, and in particular look at the spectrum of the corona and the chromosphere at totality. And he ended up discovering the element helium during this eclipse in India. So that's a very important, Indian connection to solar eclipses, right? Do eclipses help the planet in any way or useful? No, they're not useful, but they're beautiful. And I think a lot of things can be beautiful and not really useful, and that's part of why things are beautiful, right? Yeah, so you can. So somebody asked about Varahamira and so on. So Aryabhatta had actually mentioned very clearly that eclipses are caused due to the shadows of the sun and of the earth and the moon falling on each other. Okay, and he told you how to predict that. Varahamira and Bhaskara did not agree with him a little bit. Varahamira and Bhaskara invoked Rahu and Ketu. Aryabhatta did not. Much later, Lalacharya, who's another famous Indian astronomer, said the same thing. He said, look, eclipses are not caused because of demons and so on. That is a story. But eclipses are caused only because of shadows of the earth and moon falling on each other. And a lot of people in that age made fun of Lalla. Lalla was a very famous astronomer who lived, I think, 800 years ago in Gujarat, in present-day Gujarat. And people made fun of him. But he said, no, I know, I can observe eclipses. I can understand how they cause. And he insisted that the stories you have about eclipses are stories, but we understand the science behind them. And it is because of shadows, and therefore they're perfectly harmless, right? So I would rather follow Aryabhatta and Lalla, personally. So Ravindra Panyal is back here. do you want to tell us how the eclipse was upstairs? You can turn the video on.
Okay.
And tell us what you saw.
Yeah, so I had just gone out and saw the last part of the eclipse from Bangalore, and it was spectacular. We had like several students there and some visitors as well. So I would also urge people who are living in the southern state, and if they have a clear sky, they could probably step out and have the last glimpses of this eclipse, because the next one is going to happen maybe 2 years down the line. So this would be the last and the right opportunity to take the final glimpses of this year's eclipse that is visible from India. Uh, right now, only from southern state. I'm sure most of the northern state, the sun has probably already set.
Yeah. And it's setting in Bangalore as well.
It's
I think it's set in Bangalore. The sun looked weird because part of it is covered by the buildings and the moon.
Yes.
There you can see the sun being swallowed up by some apartment complex, while it's also being swallowed up by the moon from the other side.
Yeah. Can you imagine now?
So, so we'll wait till the sun sets in Bangalore and then we'll stop this live feed. This is the last view of the eclipse sun from Bangalore currently. It's already set in North India.
So there's a question.
And in Bangalore, the maximum is around 11%. So 11% of the sun's disk is covered by the moon. There we see the last remnants of the sun. And I also want to introduce you to Amit, who's been behind the computer along with Swastik, bringing us a live stream from 3 different places in India and 2 abroad. So that's Amit. Say hello.
Hey guys, nice to be here and be a part of all this.
So now we see that the sun is set. Yeah. If you're at the apartment complex there, you will still see the sun eclipse, but then they're hiding it from us. So last words, Banyal?
Yeah, so I just want to say that these solar eclipses, they are natural phenomena and they are not harmful, neither they are anyway auspicious. They are beautiful, as Neeraj has said, and we should not deprive ourselves from these wonderful spectacles that happens once in a while in the cosmos. So please go out and enjoy and encourage others also to take part in these things.
Well, the sky is beautiful in the daytime and at night time. So go look up. Contrary to what Netflix documentary's name was, at night go look at the sky. If you're in a big city, of course you can't see many stars. But if you're in a small town, then you have the entire sky for you. The beautiful Milky Way, the planets which move every day. Go to the nearest planetarium or science center, find out more about astronomy. They will have telescopes there to show you stuff at night time. Go online, look up the lovely videos explaining basic astronomy on YouTube. There'll be amateur astronomy clubs in almost every town and city in India. So find out the nearest amateur astronomy club, join them. And before we say bye, Piyali and Aratrika, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, so I could also catch a glimpse of the eclipse while on this NH48, but I could not watch it at the maximum thing because it is already now below the horizon. But while it lasted, it was really wonderful. And the sky was totally clear here.
Yeah. Thanks, Piyali. Thanks for joining us from NH44. Aratrika, any last words?
Yeah, I would like to see the results of the eclipse hitting hashtag that we quoted. Yeah, after this, check that out.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So I would also like to thank a whole bunch of IA staff who have been with us preparing for this live stream for many weeks now, from Leh and Hanle, Ladakh to Kodaikanal to Bangalore to everywhere, and as well as all our students who've been preparing these wonderful videos about eclipses in 12 different Indian languages, created posters, and helped us have this wonderful awareness campaign, which has brought all of you here for the last 2.5 hours. So thanks again, everybody, for staying with us on YouTube. And we'll meet you at the next celestial event. So meanwhile, look up at the skies, look at the stars, and have fun with the sun. Goodbye.
हे आहे मारुती सुझुकी कमर्शियल.
सांगा ना, कोणती गाडी आवडली तुम्हाला?
भाऊ भारी चीज आहे ना.
भारी चीजच खिसा हलका करते आणि ही तर खिसा कापूनच
अरे
टाकते.
लोन घेऊ ना.
प्रगती कशी होईल?
सर, ही देईल ना तुम्हाला प्रगती, आणि याचा फायनान्स करणं सुद्धा खूप सोपं आहे. हा आहे तुमचा थर्ड पार्टी फायनान्स.
वा भाऊ वा.
तर मग ही मिळवण्यासाठी मार्ग सोपा करणे आमचे कर्तव्य आहे. प्रगती तुमची, सोबत आमची.